What if your family's new home was hiding dangerous secrets? Ethan was about to find out that this wasn't just a regular move. It was the beginning of a dark journey. A mysterious attic, a glowing chest, and a malevolent entity out to capture him. Will he be able to uncover the mysteries of this house before it's too late? In this video, you'll join Ethan on a suspenseful adventure where every decision could be his last. Get ready to dive into the unknown, because the story we're about to tell will keep you hooked from start to finish.
Behind the doors.
Ethan looked out the car window as the family approached their new home. The cloudy sky and the fine rain falling lent a melancholic tone to the scene, but he couldn't take his eyes off the imposing structure ahead. The house, with its Gothic architecture, featured angular towers and tall windows that seemed to watch the world around them. The walls, covered in ivy, seemed to whisper secrets of a distant past. "Look at that, Ethan," said his mother, Anne, as she parked in front of the house. "What an incredible place." "Incredible or creepy?" Ethan replied, raising an eyebrow. "Looks like we've walked into a horror movie." His father, Tom, laughed as he turned off the engine. "It's going to be a new adventure for all of us. Think of the stories we'll have to tell." Reluctantly, Ethan got out of the car, feeling the damp air collide with his skin. He approached the house's front door, which creaked as it opened, as if complaining about their presence. The interior was as grand as the exterior, a spacious entrance hall with dark wooden floors and a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling like a beacon in the darkness. "Let's explore," suggested his younger sister, Mia, her eyes shining with excitement. "There might be ghosts." "Or treasures," Ethan replied, trying to mask the fear he felt in the face of the unknown. The first night in the house was marked by strange noises and the feeling of being watched. After a simple dinner, the family decided to retire to their rooms. While his parents talked downstairs, Ethan couldn't sleep. The sound of rain hitting the windows seemed to mingle with distant whispers, and an overwhelming curiosity began to take hold of him. "What's going on up there?" he murmured to himself, getting out of bed. The attic called to him, like a familiar shadow he couldn't ignore. Ethan climbed the creaking stairs, each step echoing in the silence of the house. When he reached the attic door, he hesitated for a moment, hearing the whispers more clearly now. He took a deep breath and turned the handle, the door opening with a deep groan. The faint light of the flashlight he carried illuminated the dusty space, revealing boxes covered in cobwebs and old furniture stacked haphazardly. The air was thick with the smell of mold and mystery, but in the back of the attic, a bright glow caught his attention. Ethan approached, his heart racing with each step. "What is this?" he murmured, almost not wanting to break the silence that enveloped him. The glow emanated from an old chest, decorated with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a forgotten story. He crouched down, feeling the dust rise around him, and touched the chest's cold surface. A shiver ran down his spine, and on impulse he decided to open it. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" A soft, ethereal voice whispered, making him stop dead in his tracks. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice trembling. The attic seemed to come alive, and the chest's glow intensified as if trying to communicate with him. Ethan felt an invisible force pulling him, and unsure of what to do, he fully opened the chest, revealing an interior filled with ancient objects, each more intriguing than the last. The atmosphere grew heavy, and the sensation that something was about to happen made his heart race. He didn't know what awaited him, but there was a certainty in his mind. That attic held secrets that could change everything. And driven by an uncontrollable curiosity, Ethan was about to discover what really lay behind that door. When Ethan opened the chest, he felt a wave of vibrant energy course through his body, as if the very air were charged with electricity. The glow emanating from the chest's interior was blinding, and he found himself unable to resist the curiosity pulsing within him. What could be hidden there? A treasure? A magical artifact? On impulse, he reached out and, upon touching the glowing object, was immediately pulled into the chest, as if a massive whirlwind had swallowed him whole. The sensation of falling was quick and disorienting. When his feet finally touched the ground, Ethan realized he was no longer in the attic of his house, but in a completely different place. Around him, a dense, dark forest stretched as far as the eye could see, with tall, gnarled trees intertwining like the fingers of a giant hand. The air was thick with an earthy smell, mixed with a faint perfume of strange flowers he had never seen before. "You've arrived," a soft yet firm voice interrupted his thoughts. Ethan turned and saw a young woman with long, disheveled hair, dressed in a gown made of leaves and flowers. She had a curious look, more like a magical creature than a human. "I am Lila. You must be Ethan." "How do you know my name?" he asked, still dazed. "I've been expecting you." "This house, your house, is a bridge between worlds," Lila replied, stepping cautiously forward, as if the ground beneath her feet could collapse at any moment. "You are destined to save us." "Save? From whom? From what?" Ethan was confused, but the intensity of the situation began to seep into his mind. What did all this mean? And why was he, an ordinary boy, destined for something so grand? "From a dark entity," Lila said, her face growing serious. "It feeds on fear and despair. It's after you, Ethan. You have an ancestral connection to this place, and it wants to capture you." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He had never believed in fairy tales or horror stories, but now, the reality around him seemed to shatter the barriers of what he considered possible. "Why me? What do I have to do with this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Your blood," Lila replied, her dark eyes gleaming with a mix of determination and sadness. "You are one of the few who can break the curse that has endured for generations. You are the key to restoring the balance between worlds." Ethan looked around, trying to absorb the magnitude of her words. He felt the weight of responsibility beginning to settle on his shoulders. "And what if I can't do it? What if I fail?" "We can't let fear paralyze us," Lila said, stepping closer and placing a hand on Ethan's arm, a comforting gesture. "We need to find the heart of the entity, and only then can you set us all free." A distant howl echoed through the forest, making Ethan shiver. "What was that?" he asked, adrenaline beginning to course through his veins. "It's her," Lila whispered, her expression now tense. "We need to move. She's not far. Come on." And so, as the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows around them, Ethan followed Lila, determined to face the unknown. With each step they took, the forest seemed more alive, as if the trees and shadows were watching them, whispering secrets only the wind could understand. It was a world where logic failed, and Ethan wondered if he would find the courage needed to face what was to come. But one thing was certain: he couldn't give up now. Ethan and Lila ran through the dense forest, their hearts pounding in unison with the adrenaline coursing through their veins. The shadows followed them as if they had a life of their own, whispering in voices that seemed to echo their deepest fears. The haunted village they had seen in the distance drew closer, a vision of desolation and regret that promised both hope and despair. "We need to hurry," Lila shouted, her disheveled hair flying in the wind. "If the entity catches us, there's no turning back." "But what are we going to do there? The village looks dead," Ethan replied, his voice laden with uncertainty. He stopped for a moment, contemplating the scene before them. The houses were in ruins, their windows broken like empty eyes watching the world without hope. A shiver ran down his spine. "It's not death, Ethan. It's a prison," Lila explained, looking at him with an intensity that made his heart race. "The inhabitants are trapped under the entity's control. We need to convince them to fight. They need to know they're not alone." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was there, not just as a spectator, but as part of something much bigger. Lila, with her burning determination, ignited a flame of courage within him. "All right, let's talk to them." When they arrived in the village, they were met with suspicious glances. The villagers, with tired faces and tattered clothes, backed away as if Ethan and Lila's presence was a painful reminder of their own misery. An old man with gray hair and weary eyes approached. "What do you want here?" "We're here to help," Lila replied, the determination in her voice echoing in the village's silence. "We know about the entity. We know you're trapped under its control. Together, we can fight." A murmur passed through the villagers. The old man crossed his arms, evaluating the young woman. "And you think you can defeat it? Many have tried and failed. What can your presence change?" Ethan felt frustration growing inside him. He had no answers, but he knew they couldn't give up. "Please," he pleaded, stepping in front of Lila. "I'm different. I feel there's something in me that can help. I'm connected to this place in ways I don't even understand. But if we don't unite, the entity will destroy us, one by one." The man looked at him with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "And what do you plan to do, boy?" "Awaken the strength within us," Ethan replied, his voice gaining confidence. "If you join us, we can face the entity together. I can feel that within each of you, there's a dormant power, a desire for freedom. We can't let more generations suffer." The tension in the air was palpable, but slowly, the villagers began to lower their guard. A young man with bright eyes and a hopeful expression stepped forward. "I'm willing to try. If there's a chance, we should unite." "Yes, we must fight," declared another woman, a spark of determination in her eyes. The flame of hope began to ignite in the gloomy village. Ethan looked at Lila, a smile of relief spreading across his face. "We're in this together," he murmured, and she nodded, her hand wrapping around his in a gesture of solidarity. "Then let's go," Lila exclaimed, her enthusiasm spreading to the group. "But first, we need to learn more about the entity. We need a plan." The villagers began to gather in a circle, and Ethan felt the energy growing around him. The stories of pain and resistance began to flow, each one telling of how the entity had infiltrated their lives, how it had stolen not just their freedom, but their hope. Ethan listened to every word, feeling the connection between them grow stronger. He realized that by uniting, they not only became stronger, but also awakened within him a power he didn't know he had. "Together, we can break this curse," he said, his voice firm. "And I feel like I can do more. I feel powers awakening inside me." Lila looked at him, her eyes shining with understanding. "Then let's find out what you can do," she said, her smile radiant. "Let's fight for the freedom of all of us." Hope was reborn in the village, and Ethan knew that together they could face the darkness that threatened them. Ethan sat on a fallen log, surrounded by the rebels who were preparing for what could be the decisive battle against the dark entity. The crackling fire illuminated the tents. The plan they had devised was risky, but the determination in their eyes showed that they were ready to fight. "We need to be quick and silent," said Lila, her voice firm, though her eyes betrayed a shadow of concern. "The entity's fortress is full of traps, and we can't afford to be discovered." Ethan nodded, but doubt hung in his mind. What if we don't make it? What if all of this is in vain? He looked at Lila, seeking comfort, but found only determination. "If we don't try, we've already lost. Remember what's at stake, Ethan. Your family, our freedom. You're stronger than you think." Her words encouraged him, but the worry still consumed him. He thought of his previous life, the small things that now seemed so distant. Friends at school, nights playing video games, family laughter. How could he balance two such different worlds? "Let's go, Ethan," one of the rebels named Marcus interrupted his thoughts. "It's time to move. If we stay here, the entity will find us." The group stood up, and Ethan felt a knot in his stomach as he realized that the moment of truth had arrived. They followed a narrow path between the trees, with Lila leading the way. The sounds of nature around them seemed a stark contrast to the tension permeating the air. When they reached the vicinity of the fortress, Ethan felt a wave of negative energy. It was as if the place itself was alive, pulsing with a malevolent force. The structure was imposing, made of dark stones and shrouded in a dense fog that seemed to absorb the light. "There's the entrance," Lila whispered, pointing to a dark opening. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to master the fear growing inside him. What if there are creatures inside? Then we'll face them. Together. Marcus replied, with a determined look. "Let's move." They crossed the entrance and were soon greeted by a corridor lit only by flickering torches. The air was heavy, and Ethan could smell mold and something else, something that made him feel nauseous. As they advanced, traps began to manifest. A sharp blade fell from one side, and Ethan reacted instinctively, using his newfound powers to stop the blade in midair. He pushed it back with a quick gesture, and the blade shattered against the wall. "Wow," Lila exclaimed, impressed. "You're getting really good at this." "I'm just trying to stay alive," Ethan replied, a nervous smile on his face. But inside, he felt exhausted. Using his powers was more draining than he had imagined. "What was that?" one of the rebels asked, looking at Ethan with a mix of respect and concern. "I don't know. When I feel fear, it's like something inside me wakes up." They continued to advance, growing more "This must be a place of power," Lila murmured, observing the inscriptions on the walls. "This is where the entity likely performs its rituals." Ethan approached a central pedestal, where a relic glowed with its own light. It was an amulet, adorned with precious stones that seemed to pulse with life. When he reached out to grab it, a wave of energy coursed through his body. He saw flashes of images, a line of ancestors, a curse, and the entity, not just as an enemy, but as an echo of his own lineage. "What is this?" Lila asked, concerned as she saw Ethan's expression change. I don't know, but I feel this has something to do with my family, with the curse." He looked at Lila, his words barely more than a whisper. "The entity isn't just an enemy. It's connected to me in a way I don't understand." At that moment, the room's door slammed shut violently, and a threatening presence began to materialize. The entity was there, and the upcoming battle promised to be more challenging than anyone could imagine. The relic pulsed in his hands, as if it contained the very heart of the house and everything it held. Ethan observed it carefully, his fingers tracing the intricate contours of the object, while the memories of his lineage intertwined in his mind. "The only way to break the curse is to confront the entity," Lila murmured, her voice tense. "We need to find out. It's powerful, and we're just the two of us." Lila stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Ethan. Together we can face this. The entity is afraid of you, of your strength." Determination grew within him. "All right, let's find this entity." With one last look at the relic, they headed towards the fortress, whose shadows seemed to swallow the light around them. The path was winding, flanked by twisted trees and thorny bushes, as if the very ground were trying to stop them from moving forward. When they reached the fortress entrance, a chilling sensation ran down Ethan's spine. The atmosphere was charged with oppressive energy. "Are we ready for this?" he asked, hesitant. "We have no choice," Lila replied, her voice firm. "The village's lives depend on us." As they crossed the threshold of the fortress, a sound echoed, as if the very structure were laughing at them. Once again, the descendants venturing where they are not welcome, a voice boomed, deep and threatening. The entity materialized before them, a figure shrouded in shadows, with glowing eyes that seemed to devour their essence. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, though he knew the answer. The entity was a part of his past, a shadow of his family. "I am what you fear, what your lineage could not destroy," the entity replied, a cruel smile forming on its face. Lila stepped forward. "We are not afraid of you. We are here to free the village and break your curse." "Free?" The entity laughed, the sound of its laughter echoing like thunder. "Do you think you can change what is already written? Come then, face your fears, if you can escape the labyrinth I've created." Before they could protest, the fortress began to fade, and Ethan found himself being pulled into a void, a distorted space where the walls seemed to pulse with their own consciousness. He and Lila were trapped in a labyrinth of illusions, surrounded by images of their deepest fears. "Ethan!" Lila shouted, her voice echoing. He saw her being pulled away, surrounded by shadows dancing around her. "No! Lila!" The sight of the young woman disappearing made him feel a wave of despair. He was trapped in a space that preyed on his insecurities. He saw the image of his family, all of them looking at him with disappointment. "You're not strong enough," a voice whispered, echoing in his brain. He closed his eyes, trying to focus. "I am strong," he murmured. "I can be strong." But doubt threatened to consume him. The image of Lila, lost in the labyrinth, pushed him to fight. "Lila!" he shouted, his voice reverberating against the walls. "Where are you?" "Ethan!" The reply came from afar, but it was clear. He began to run, the shadows trying to grab him, but he remembered the relic. It was with him, pulsing, offering a connection to his true essence. "I can't give up," he said to himself. And as he spoke those words, a light began to emanate from the relic, illuminating the labyrinth and dispelling the shadows around him. "Lila, I'm coming." The light grew, and he saw Lila ahead, trapped in a web of illusions. "Ethan, help me," she pleaded. He advanced, the relic glowing intensely, and taking courage said, "I won't leave you behind. Let's face this together." At that moment, the entity reappeared, a disdainful smile on its face. "Do you think you can escape? The labyrinth is your prison." But now, Ethan felt the strength of the relic pulsing in sync with his heart. He wasn't alone. Lila was with him, and together they would have to discover the truth that could set them free. Ethan looked around the labyrinth of illusions, feeling the weight of pressure and despair. The walls seemed to pulse as if the very place was alive, feeding off their fears. He and Lila were surrounded by shadows, distorted figures that whispered dark secrets, trying to break their resolve. But amidst the chaos, a spark of hope began to glow within him. He realized that true strength didn't come from his powers, but from the unity between the worlds. "Lila, we need to gather the villagers," Ethan exclaimed, his voice echoing through the labyrinth. "Alone, we're lost, but together, we can face this." "You're right, Ethan," Lila responded, her expression lighting up. "If we can summon their strength, maybe we can turn this place into something that favors us." With renewed determination, Ethan and Lila focused. He closed his eyes and, with a gesture of his hands, began to channel his energy. Lila did the same, and together they began to call upon the spirits of the villagers who had long been imprisoned by the dark entity. The labyrinth trembled in response, and suddenly the shadows began to dissipate. The villagers, one by one, began to emerge from the walls, their expressions determined. They gathered around Ethan and Lila, forming a circle of strength and courage. "We're with you," shouted one of the villagers, a robust-looking man, his eyes shining like stars. "Let's fight together." Ethan felt warmth spreading throughout his body. The collective energy of the villagers was palpable, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the labyrinth transforming. The darkened walls were replaced by radiant light, and the environment reshaped into a battlefield where hope and determination reigned. "Now, let's confront it!" Ethan shouted, and the crowd charged toward the entity, which manifested in the form of a colossal shadow, filled with rage and sadness. The truth revealed itself as the entity drew closer. It wasn't just a force of evil, but a distorted representation of his own ancestor, someone who had been consumed by darkness. "You cannot defeat me. I am part of you." The entity roared, its voice sounding like a distant echo. "You will never escape your legacy." Ethan stopped, feeling the deep connection he had with the figure. Memories of his family, of stories told at the table, and of an ancestor who had carried a burden for generations flooded his mind. He realized that to break the curse, he needed not only to confront the entity, but also to reconcile with his past. "I am not you. I am Ethan, and I choose my own path," he shouted, his voice resonating with a strength that surprised even himself. "You are not the shadow that defines me, but a part of my story, and I will not let you continue to haunt my family." With a powerful movement, he reached out and, upon touching the entity, felt a wave of energy flow between them. The shadows began to unravel, and Ethan saw flashes of his ancestor's life, moments of pain and loss, but also of love and hope. "It's time to free him!" Lila shouted, joining her strength with Ethan's. Together they channeled the villagers' energy, creating a beam of light that illuminated the labyrinth, dissolving the darkness that surrounded the entity. The entity's scream echoed, mingling with a deep lament as the light enveloped it. In a final push, Ethan felt the connection between the two worlds strengthen, and with a shout of liberation, he finally broke the curse. The entity dissolved into particles of light, and in its place a sense of peace enveloped the environment. The villagers, now free, began to dissipate in a soft glow, smiles of gratitude on their faces. Ethan looked at Lila, and they exchanged a look that said more than words could express. Together they had won not just a battle, but also a cycle of pain that spanned generations. "We did it, Ethan," Lila said, her voice full of emotion. "We're free. Yes, and now we can go home. But we won't forget what we've learned here," Ethan replied, feeling the strength of unity between the worlds pulsing within him. And so, with the curse finally broken, Ethan and Lila prepared to return to the real world, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that true strength lies in unity and understanding their own stories.